Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today, I'm joined by Deirdre. Deirdre, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, before we dive into the subject, which is super timely for right now, Deirdre, could you maybe just give us a quick update about who you are, what you do, what you love about marketing, and then we'll dive into the subject for the day.
Yes, no problem, Ben. So, Deirdre Mahan, I hail from Dublin, Ireland, now living in Bay Area, San Francisco, California. I am a lifetime marketer. Actually studied marketing back in London, England, went to the Chartered Institute of Marketing. My background is B2B, technology focused for usually product companies. I've worked at a lot of different companies, small, medium, and large. My most favorite thing is actually talking to customers and listening to the customers and their pain. And we all know what persona means. So I really dig in and understand the DNA of the buyer and the user. That's what I enjoy. And when the customer spits back the message, then it comes full circle and joy bubbles come out of my brain when that happens.
That's awesome. Well, Deirdre and I had an opportunity to talk quickly before the podcast, and we felt like it would be good to really talk about a timely subject. Everyone right now that I know of is actively building out their budgets and building out their plans for 2024. And there is this balance between setting goals and accomplishing these goals and what the day-to-day activities and things like that look like. And I think it's something that's really important for us to understand. It's really difficult to set a goal and then really figure out at the end of the day, how am I going to accomplish that? What does, Tuesday morning look like to get there, something like that. So Deirdre, when you're looking at it, and I'm sure in your career, you've set many goals and you've built out lots of strategies and set budgets. How do you balance those two things? How do you balance the strategy versus the day-to-day activities that will help you accomplish that?
Not an easy answer, but let's try and break this down. First of all, I think because I've been managing marketing function and teams for a while, I have developed this muscle, which is always think long term. Where do you want to get to? And usually that for marketers, it's really hard to do that in just monthly or quarterly if you're B2B. So you're often thinking like 6 months down the line. Think of half year. And you do have to sell that internally to other functional owners, especially finance, because you're budgeting that far out. So you have that as your backdrop and you sort of develop that sort of long-term muscle. And then you think about it, you sort of what those revenue targets and where the company wants to be in 6 months or a year. And then you have to sort of back up from that. And I use the term breadcrumbing. So what are all the breadcrumbing things that we need to do in order to achieve those targets and those goals for the company, but more specifically then for team marketing? A few other things I would say. Team marketing never exists in a vacuum. Team marketing has tentacles into every other function of the business. And of course, sales. So I always consider myself and the marketing team, we are aligned and sitting alongside with sales. We're not above them, we're not below them, we're right by their side. We are allies and partners in the truest sense of the word. And if the partnership has some tension in it, step one, sort out that tension. Sit down and really have those candid conversations. So we just went through a 2-day offsite planning exercise. So I'll sort of go a little bit more tactical now. What I do when I do any offsite planning, and we're taking a lot of time and energy out of the day-to-day tasks to do this. First thing is create your agenda, create the big hairy topics and things that you want to attack as a team. And that should dotted line to the company overall goals. So you would naturally know that, hopefully. Plan and prep. So before you show up for that offsite and you spend 2 days together, share the agenda weeks in advance. Get your team to head nod and rally behind that, and then divide and conquer. So you basically sort of like, I usually break the team up into like pods of 2 at a time. So these 2 team members go work on this topic and so on. And then by the time you get in the room, the team has already socialized the ideas, they put more sort of meat on the bone, if you like. And when you get to that meeting, it's just a lot of more sharing. And, you time box it, and then you come to some decisions and compromises and agreements. And once you get the shape of that right, I actually do a readout. So the readout is then what you're going to summarize and share with other functional leaders. And that's amazing, because now you start to get immediate alignment very quickly before you put pen to paper and finalize.
What does that readout look like? How do you craft a readout?
This is also a thing that I think is so important for marketing teams. We were chatting earlier, Ben, and I was like, there's so many disparate functions and sub-functions within marketing, like everything from SEO to organic to paid to product marketing, the list is long. And, depending on your maturity and size, you might have like people wearing multiple hats. But everyone in marketing is nowadays like an expert in their lane or a specialist. But you also have to know what the other team members are expert in. And I always say, like, finish each other's sentences. You understand and respect their lane. You don't necessarily have to know it deeply. The marketing function will not operate unless these sub-functions are all in concert and synchronizing. Marketing is a team sport, no question. So one of the things we do in those meetings is the prep in advance. You have slides and notes that you share. You walk people through that. You time box it. And then there's note taking during the meeting. So literally the very next day, the summary it doesn't have to be beautifully polished, but it's in slide form and it's summarized. And what we literally did is we invited the executives of the other functions to the readout meeting, and we walked them through it for an hour and a half or 2 hours. They have an opportunity to poke holes, ask questions, clarify. And then now the team feels really good about it because they got exposure and they got to share the sort of their thinking and a little bit of the sausage making, which actually is an internal marketing exercise.
Yep, I love that. I think in order to have success, and I've seen this in my career as well, other departments have to know they played a role in setting your goals before they're solidified. All too often it's, hey, here's our goals for the year. Here's how we're going to support you. And here's what we're going to do. And no one feels like they can contribute. Then it wasn't their idea. And then 6 months down the road, I knew this was going to fail from day one or something like that. You can have internal strife. So I think that's really, really smart to have that secondary step. I also love how you prepare so thoroughly. I have been to year planning meetings where we have a meeting for a couple hours. Everyone puts on sticky notes what they think we need to do. We see where the clusters are. We have our plan. And I've always wanted to prepare for those a little bit more. Sometimes those work really good. I think those are great for getting the juices flowing to go to an offsite or go to something else. But if you're going to dedicate 6 months to a year to something, taking some significant time to really analyze what you think needs to be done is important.
Yeah, it's too important. I always believe the best meetings are the ones where you do a lot of prep and a lot of research and a lot of thinking. And I tell my team, because everybody's so busy day to day, I literally say, give yourself the brain space, because the ideas come from that white space. They don't come from the day-to-day blocking and tackling. So one important additional point I will make is I am sort of the servant leader. I am like doing as much. I'm hands-on as well. So I always say, if you don't get in the mud with the team, you won't have a deeper understanding and you won't even know how long something takes to execute. It's harder for bigger teams, but you can definitely at certain altitudes, you can still get in the mud, right? I never do this sort of like, I am dictating what the topics should be. What I do is when I shape the agenda, I ask for feedback. I literally say, is this the right set of topics? Do please chime in. The other area that I ask for feedback is themes. So people remember, fewer things. So what is the theme that we're going to run for the quarter or the 6 month time frame? What's that overarching thing that we need to all hang our hat on? and then get agreement in advance. It's going to be a lot harder to execute if you don't.
So you've explained it really well. Okay, here's how we come up with goals and how we prepare for those and kind of do the sign on and the sign off of that. And then you talked about working backwards from those. When you work backwards, how do you know you're on track? How do you know that things are building up towards accomplishing your larger goals and where you might need to make pivots along the way?
This is the art and science of marketing. And immediately I'm seeing like spreadsheets in Rubik's Cube type complicated things, right?
Yep.
There's a few things. So I actually am a great partner with our head of finance. That is, head of sales, head of finance. I mean, those are key partners. And if you know what your financial targets are in terms of your revenue numbers, then you will also know, okay, what the budget looks like. And there's some negotiation that has to happen there, right? Hopefully you will have some historical perspective from a data analysis, what worked before, what didn't work. So let's assume you have like systems like HubSpot and Salesforce in place and some analytics on top of that. So you have a sense of like, this worked really well or this didn't. So now you have solid framework on budgetary spend. I literally fill in the 2024 budget now. And what I do is a top down and bottoms up. So the top down is the conversation with the finance team, and planning in terms of like what's budget and revenue targets. And then the bottoms up is, I call it like, I'm going out shopping now and I'm going to go and find out what I want to do and how much everything costs. And there will be standard things that we do again and again each year because they're working. And you might do a little uptick because you want growth on those. And then you have the play money or the experiment. Most innovative teams, even if you're a startup, great, you're innovating all the time, but you might be like a smaller team inside a big enterprise. There you have to be able to say to your financial partner, because ROI is so important for marketers. You have to say, right, I'm going to play with this percentage of the budget. I'm not sure. I have a hypothesis that it's going to work. And this is when I'm going to do it. And then when I'm going to know measurement. So just be very judicious and put rigor behind that. And then communication is absolutely key. So don't keep it a secret. Be honest if the experiment isn't working and tell everybody. Learn from it together. But when things are working, then shout that to the mountaintops because people want to know, oh my God, you're doing good job. Thumbs up. And the team will be joyous when they know that they're actually doing something that bears fruit.
And that's also someone that has a really long-term vision. Like clearly you have that experience because anyone who's not experimenting today is for sure at some point in time in the future going to have other channels that start to dry out. And if you're not cultivating and creating channels today, you will not have replacements for them. Or if you're not experimenting in your current channels, where you could get some more life out of them, you're going to experience these really big dips and then you'll be forced to do it and it'll be desperate instead of proactive.
So true. One of the cautionary tales is if you're not thinking about where you're going to experiment and try for growth, someone else in the organization will for you. And then they'll come at you and say, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And then it becomes super distracting. So allow the team, the brain space and the creative juices, time box that in on a regular basis where you're like, okay, this is just for ideas. We may park them all or we might experiment on them.
Yeah. And what I loved is what you said earlier about giving yourself some time and space to think. If we're so caught up in the day-to-day, it's hard to look to the future. It's hard to look towards experimentation. All of those things, getting outside and taking walks or having blocks of time to just sit and think or whatever it may be. Often people feel really unproductive doing those things, but really if you're in something out, it's super hard. You're just stuck and you'll never come up with those creative and innovative ideas. So I love that, how important that is. Do you build that in? Like how do you encourage the team to take that time on a regular basis?
I mean, I probably could do a lot better, right? When you're a young, growing company like we are at Catch and Release, you're just constantly blocking and tackling, right? You're in the tactics. You're executing the plan, right? You're not random. You're executing the plan. You tell people the plan, you tell them again, you update them on the plan, and you execute and measure and keep going. I just had a conversation today with one of my colleagues on the team, and we were, it's 2024, and I think meeting hygiene is a thing. So, we're all guilty of too many Zooms, right? So I was like, let's carve out even 30 minutes once a week to just only be ideas. And just sometimes it's just like therapeutic or cathartic to just have a chat about something. But our regular weekly meeting for an hour is much more about tactics and did you do this or red flags, So just make sure you carve it out deliberately.
As promised, we are already at time for the day. Those go super quick. Deirdre, thank you so much for your time today, for coming on. How can anyone reach out and connect with you and potentially further the conversation if they want to learn more or, pick your brain about something?
Yeah, I love that. I love talking to any marketer. We have this little bit of FOMO. Sometimes we're like, oh my God, is there something new I don't know about? So sharing is really good. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Deirdre Mahon, Mahon is the spelling of the last name. Or you could email me. It's Deirdre, and there's 2 R's, DEIRDRE, at Catch and Release.
Very cool.
I'd like fishing, but it's not a fishing company.
I love it. It sounds like an awesome business as well. Worth checking out for sure.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the time today. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. And best of luck in the new year, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.